host, Chaps McFarland, and much appreciate we have the opportunity to learn from one another. Our stories are powerful and needed as well. It took a pandemic like this for us to think. I have focused on using my art as a tool. Because the opportunities are vast. This is a crucial moment. Not much to engage that study right now. I'm your host here, Chaps McFarland. Welcome to Unfiltered. Let's get started. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Unfiltered. Thank you for joining us this beautiful Sunday evening. We are glad that you are here for this great conversation we're going to be having. We have a powerful panel that is going to be joining us this evening to help unpack some of the issues that we are going to discuss, and also to provide some great perspective on how we together as a collective can put our hands and our heads and our energies together to help solve some of these issues that are going to be raised during this conversation. So, ladies and gentlemen, you know what to do when you join this show. We're always excited to have you on. Please share, like, invite others to join, start a watch party if you can. Make sure that this message from this platform gets across. So thank you once more. I'm going to introduce all of our guests to you here today. Right on the screen with me is Dr. Nwankwo. Dr. Nwankwo Chini is a doctor. He's also a barrister at law, and he just talking to him from the start there, did his PhD in international law, and he does have a practice. He's joining us from Nigeria. Thank you so much, Dr. Nwankwo, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Chaps, for having me. Good evening, everybody.
Yes, and also joining us on the phone, we would say that we without camera is Dr. Osong. Dr. Osong has been a guest on the show before. Dr. Osong is an aerospace engineer, and she is an educator and also a facilitator. She's been a guest on this show before. You know her. Welcome, Dr. Osong, and thank you for taking the time out of what is, I know, a busy time and to talk to us.
Thank you, Chaps, and welcome to our guest on the show as well. And glad to speak with you again, Chaps, and to engage with your audience.
Thank you. And finally, we have Kenneth Oguzie. Kenny joining us right from here in Nova Scotia, Canada. Ken is a facilitator for diversity and inclusion. Ken is also an entrepreneur and owner and director. He's the founder, owner, director of ACTIV. ACTIV is the Africa Canada Trade and Investment Venture. I got it right, Ken?
Yes, Chef, it's always on point. Good evening, viewers. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. And hello, fellow panelists or fellow co-facilitators. Yeah, it's great to be here once again, and I'm looking forward to the conversations today.
Well, and we have a number of other, we have two other panelists who will be joining us in the course of the show. But here we are, and to kick things off, I want to ask you, Dr. Nwankwo, what's going on in Nigeria?
Thank you for having me again, Chaps. Well, Nigeria, for now, we're still grappling with nationwide protests over police brutality, which sadly came to a very traumatic end on the 20th of, not an end, but then it got to the point where lives were lost, you know, where peaceful protesters were murdered at the Lekki toll gate on the 20th of October last month. So for now, everything is still muted, but the tension is palpable. And there are no plans, I don't think, of these protests abating, because it's the ends. Originally, it started as agitations for an end to police police reforms, an end to police brutality. But then the EndSars has become a metaphor for agitations generally over corruption, bad governance, and poverty in the land. So for now, with Nigeria, there's tension in the polity. It's clearly heated up, in addition to our own myriad problems of the COVID-19 pandemic, insecurity, and so on and so forth. So Nigeria is bubbling under right now.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Osong, before I come back to you, Kenny, Dr. Osong, what is happening in Ambazonia or the southern Cameroons? Just to give our viewers a little bit of an overview.
Thank you, Chaps. And to my brother, Dr. Nwankwo, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I thank you for that brief overview. I like to chip in to just make a point that, there's an old saying that if Nigeria sneezes, the entire Africa continent catches a fever. So while we are there in southern Cameroon's Ambazonia, hoping that our brothers across on the West will come and give us some sustenance in what is an existential threat. Now we have the giant on the continent sneezing. So I must laugh a little bit and clear my throat here, not to take matters light, because you guys are actually dealing with some really serious, what, going there.
Right.
So I want to say that yes, Nigeria is a very, very important regional actor. We have to pay very special attention to what's going on in Nigeria, a list of which we need not only a stable neighbor to us, but we also need Nigeria to begin to stand up, to take its rightful place as it normally does on the continent on matters of geopolitical interest. And that which currently is what has been described by a number of key notable organizations around the world, a list of which is the Norwegian Refugee Council, that yet again, the world is asleep as a Rwanda-style genocide is unfolding in what the country calls its no-so. For those of you, my co-panelists who don't understand this, when someone believes that they have you in a subjective position, they tend to give you names. So NOSO is the French Cameroon version of its northwest southwest region, which is the former southern Cameroons. So without taking us back to German Cameroon, MCHEPS, your audience would by now already be aware that there is a war going on in southern Cameroon just this past October 24th, culminating in what has been nearly 4 years, is the brutal massacre in Kumba of 8 students. Now, if the world is not aware, because their attention is probably directed elsewhere, let me remind people that in Cameroon today, you send your kid to school, you're likely not to have that kid come home at the end of the day. Why? Because that region has been militarized. President Biya of La République du Cameroun in October of last year declared war, moved its military into the area, and as of today, nearly 15,000 citizens of what they call Anglophone extraction have been killed. That region now boasts the 6th largest internally displaced people. Nearly 500 villages has been burned. As of just this weekend, another village was burned. At least it is reported nearly 3 million people are at risk of famine because they have either deserted their farmlands, their homes, and they have nowhere to go. So there is a current war going on, and people will naturally want to know, why are Blacks still fighting their brothers? This is a question of having one country decide that another part of a country will be assimilated through force. Meanwhile, these are a people who came into what you would call a federation of two equal states, and over 58 years are now subjected to a war of completion of an assimilation process. So on the surface, you will have people talk about marginalization, Anglophones, issues of bilingualism, issues of representation in the government. But at the root of the problem is the fight of a people who believe that in 1961, they achieved their independence. They opted to enter into a federation as one of two equal states, and that federation was illegally abolished and they were systematically assimilated. And when they agitated over issues of governance, issues of common law, issues of education, the president of the country decides to move its military and declare war on the people. And now 4 years into this crisis, we are still seeing the massacres continue. So to summarize, while next door we have what is an internal agitation to change the lives of people so they are not subjected to the brutality of people who are put in power, in places of power to guard them, like the military and the police. In our case, we are fighting so that we can have the right to live free in our land, the right for self-determination, and the right to take our own destiny in our hands. At this point, it is a 4-year-long war that is taken an untold harm on the people, and we need Nigeria. I keep saying this. We need Nigeria to sort of, I guess, calm down a little bit so we can get some help from them, because as I said earlier on, we don't want the problems to compound and Africa degenerate. So we do need Nigeria to work hard at getting the SARS thing. I noticed that the president is doing some consultation. So because we want Nigeria to really opine and take its role at the level of African Union to bring up the matter, especially that of the human rights abuses in Southern Cameroons, to be taken up at the level of the African Union. So let me stop there, MCHEPS.
Well, that's a good overview, and thank you for that. I will be following up on that. But Ken, let me bring you in here, and Ed just joined us. Ken, you are somebody that speaks out regularly on some of the ills in Nigeria. You led a protest here in Canada in support in solidarity with the youth who were out there. And I've seen you spoken out more since that violent, brutal episode where people lost their lives. Can you give us some perspectives from the diaspora looking in what this all means?
Thank you very much, Chefs. And also thank you very much, Dr. Osong, for that overview. I think it's very useful for our viewers to, put most things into perspective. And personally, I've always echoed this to Chefs that I stand in solidarity with the Ambazonian people, because some of the struggles we can also relate from the southern parts of Nigeria, Southeast specifically, with the whole Biafra movement. But at the end of the day, I think there are a lot of similarities, but obviously underneath, when you seem to unwrap it, then you find out some of the peculiarities. But I think the key thing there is still around some of the issues of leadership, which we have struggled in the continent for years. I still struggle to understand how leadership don't understand the fact that, you know, as a leader, you have to apply some level of empathy. You need to understand that you are like servants to the people, and the people's needs and their desires should always take precedence over your own personal selfish interests, which is typically what has, you know, culminated into some of the issues we have seen, you know, in the last 2-3 decades in the region. But I think back to the thing around Nigeria, it's been a long time coming in terms of this issue. And as Dr. Nwankwo alluded to earlier, this started off as like a protest against police brutality for SARS. So SARS, just to also give you a bit of history, SARS was set up in 1992, and the aim was around, you know, trying to ensure that there's like a special force to support the regular policemen in terms of combating crime, armed robbery specifically, and all of that. But then over the years, as usual, which is typical, you know, it has degenerated into a, you know, lawless arm of the police who have been accused of things ranging from kidnapping, armed robbery typically, and some other things. So there has been a lot of issues. There's been a lot of agitation for government to reform it. Government has tried or has told us they would reform it 4 times in the, you know, in the past 6 or 7 years. But till now, there's not really been any noticeable change. So this time, you know, the youth got tired of the whole thing. Obviously, part of it is also based on, you know, bad governance and some of the other social and economic issues which we have witnessed in the region. So, you know, they took to the streets, started protesting. You know, the diaspora as well got involved. A couple of people, even here in Halifax, you know, got involved, kickstarted the protest. Of course, they got me, you know, to join the protest. So I didn't lead the protest. I actually joined, and obviously I'm always like at the forefront of trying to speak up against some of these ills which we witness in the region. You know, so the protest was going on peacefully until the whole Lekki toll gate incidents in Lagos, where, you know, innocent people were shot at, you know, by people who are paid to protect their lives, you know, and property, so the military. So as usual, there's been a lot of whole back and forth in terms of we didn't shoot, you know, we didn't shoot directly at them, you know, we didn't send the soldiers and all of that, which is what typically happens in the region until another issue will take over and, you know, distractions. But in this situation, this is a very unique one because the youths have, you know, they're not really prepared to back down in this situation. You know, there's a lot of chaotic organization. So what do I mean by that? A protest which didn't really have a leader. So you can't really point to anyone you want to intimidate or you want to pay off. Everything just grew organically. And there has been a lot of coordination with members of the diaspora, you know, in terms of support, both financial, you know, in terms of structures, in terms of amplifying the voices, in terms of bringing all the, you know, international players to be aware. Obviously, I'm not an advocate of relying on, you know, the international, the global north to help solve our problems because it's all about interest. So, but for me, I just think it's about creating that level of awareness for people to understand, you know, what are the realities on ground so that the government doesn't typically do what they do best, which is, you know, create confusion and try to drown the truths and the reality. So this is like a summary of what's going on. And I think it's going to be a very interesting time. It is an interesting time. Like I always been saying, it's a good time to be alive as a youth, you know, because it's one of those things where we have been speaking for a long time, but no one has been listening. So, you know, like in the normal thing where they talk about the fact that, you know, real power cannot be given, it has to be forcefully taken. So at the end of the day, we have gotten to that stage where, you know, we can't beg you to, you know, relinquish power or, you know, put everything on a level playing field whereby people can compete favorably in everything. So this is probably the time to speak up and, you know, we keep moving, you know, that's the slogan, we move, you know, we keep moving, we keep the conversations going, we keep, you know, seeking support from the various allies and we'll see how things progress. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you very much, Ken. And I'll just introduce viewers to our panelists who just joined us. This is Edwin Ngang. Mr. Ngang is located in the USA. He's an Ambazonian, bona fide, and he's also a political scientist or a political enthusiast. And he's done some work on Ambazonia for many, many, many years. They are some of the pioneers on this work. So Ed, thanks for joining the show today.
Thank you, Mark. I came in late from some emergency that just happened less than 30 minutes before show time, but I'm glad that I'm here with you and the rest of the panel.
Well, thank you. So Ed, we're just setting the stage for our discussion, and we were laying out an overview of, both the issues in Nigeria and the issues in, Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia. So as somebody who has been working on this issue, even before anybody, some of us, even became fully aware of what was happening, please give us some perspective as to this issue, how this issue took off from when you became involved, I would say going back all the ways to the 90s, and where you see us now at the level that we are at.
I can say that Ambazonians are very fond of looking at world events and trying to see how they can relate to it. And I'm sure right now they're looking at what is going on with the EndSars movement in Nigeria and making some very simplistic analogies without taking stock of how their own system is very unique. My prayers are that the EndSars movement, which has, in my overview of the literature, dovetailed into a new Nigerian movement, actually ends up becoming the sample of what the new change processes that should happen in sub-Saharan Africa. Nigeria is a country that necessarily has to take its place where it should be. If the democratic change that is being demanded by the youth, who constitute over 35% of the population, is at the minimum accepted, and I'm seeing some signs that the majority of the Nigerian civil society are in line with this movement for a new Nigeria, we are in a very good posture. And that is my saying I'm talking about the change that we require in Ambazonia. Look, there is no comparison between Nigeria and Cameroon. Whereas Nigerian system is unique, they can tolerate certain change, and they have their own system where they are a federated state that respects some degree of state autonomy. The federation, that is nothing to be compared with ours. Ours is a case of sovereignty. It's a thing that should never have happened right from the word go in 1960. You have not heard of France and England coming and negotiating or having dialogue like what just happened a couple of days or yesterday about how to fix a system. These two systems are inherently and systemically incompatible. They are immiscible properties that should be let go at the minimum, or at the maximum, they should just be given the structures and the laws that should guide them. We came to a confederation. The confederation has failed thoroughly. The evidence is that the confederation, which was supposed to be called Federal Cameroon United Republics with an S, that is how the name was supposed to have been called as per the plebiscite pact, the interparliamentary treaty that took place between the Republic of Southern Cameroons. Of course, you will never see anywhere in the books the term Republic of Southern Cameroons. And this is very, very telling about our history. You always see government of Southern Cameroon, but we had all the attributes of a country, sovereign state. We have elected prime minister who was the head of government. We had an independent judiciary. We had a legislature. We had a thriving free press. And we, as per United Nations Article 76B, which is the only statute that all Ambazonians should be focusing on, nothing else, we have fulfilled the intent and the express intent of the mandate, which was to be left from the state of self, of dependency to independence. Article 76B is the ultimate article that all Ambazonians should be citing. We have achieved our self-government in 1954 when we had our independent House of Parliament and Judiciary, and we had an elected Prime Minister in 1960. So what else was required? Our people felt that they needed to enhance this independence by coming into a confederation with a totally alien culture, which was the French Cameroon, already independent, separate from us. They were independent in January 1st, 1960. We were independent in October 1st, 1960. This confederation had only 8 matters of concurrent jurisdiction, whereas we were supposed to have our own independent. We could create our own army, our own navy, our own custom and excess duties, our own air force, our own airplane. Everything that a country sovereign could have done, we could have done. The matters that were for concurrent jurisdiction were basically symbolic: federal government, national defense, higher education, foreign affairs, post and telecommunication. Those were the matters that could have were delegated for federal government. But here's the deal. We have a culture since 1948, since we were granted that trusteeship status, of having no concept of sovereignty, which is very alarming because this culture persists till date. If we had a political culture where we were inculcating our own independent sense of sovereignty, you would never have had parties all over the place spiced with Pan-Cameroon appellations. Cameroon KNDP, Cameroon National Democratic Party, CPNC, Cameroon People's National Congress, KPP, Cameroon People's Party. Those were all the parties that represented our history. What was this notion about having a relationship with Cameroon? That is our nemesis. That is where the ultimate problem of our lack of sovereignty focus comes into play. And of course, when we had the chance to be independent, we mistakenly, or I would say stupidly, adopted a French immigrant person to be our leader. And that person was the one promoting the reunification. The reunification was to be on the basis of a confederation, as I stated, on those 8 matters, which never got implemented because, in actual fact, the Constitution from day one, right from the top, was the constitution of a Cameroon united country. It was not a federation. If you look at everything in the Cameroon it was called Federal Republic of Cameroon. That was not a federation constitution because we never established that. They just imposed on it, as we know, in formal accord. But Article 47 has specifically prohibited any action that will jeopardize the integrity of the state. What happened in 1972 was a violation of Article 47. Okay, that was an act that should have ended that union that we had, that unfortunate union. But we still hung around, whereas they were planning to completely wipe out and annex us. They were planning, assimilation was taking place, harmonization and integration. All those forces that were being used in Cameroon tactics, the French system that has no basis, they have no relationship with the freedom that we inherited from Anglo-Saxon tradition, was being imposed on Ambazonia. Here's what happened in 1984. They felt they had sufficiently annexed and assimilated also. They passed the restoration law of February 4th, 1984, and returned the country to the term Republic of Cameroon. Of course, that was not a deal. Our parents went to the polls on February 11, 1961 to vote. They went to create a confederation, which was not effected, which ended up becoming annexation. Of course, by grace of God, it was dissolved. That is the origin of Republic of Ambazonia. Those of you out there hearing, you think the word Republic of Ambazonia just came out of a political convention like what happened at Zaire. No, Republic of Ambazonia is a constitutional originated recognition of that sovereignty that we should have been inculcating in our polity since 1948, which we failed to do. As a responsible politician, it is your duty to scan the environment and see where you should best articulate your services in terms of what your representation is for your people. So at the basis of our struggle is the concept of sovereignty, which we have not yet adopted. I'm saying that because we went and created a Federal Republic of Ambazonia at Zaria, which confused our international allies that we have been meticulously cultivating since 1984. Ambazonia was not slipping. We've exhausted all domestic remedies. HCP 2892, case filed in Bamenda High Court, challenged Cameroon occupation of Ambazonia, which they could not argue. And then we've also exhausted international revenues, which was by virtue of the ICJ, the Bakassi proceeding, and the International Criminal Court, the ICCPR, in 2005. They all have come down to a point where the principle of territoriality was unveiled in especially the International Court of Justice, the decision at Bakassi. Why is that important? It is important because it indicates for the first time that someone is trying to solve a problem using the judicial method. But of course, that is not sufficient enough. That is why Ambazonia started lobbying the federal government of Nigeria. Unfortunately for us, we have a relationship with the South-South people of Niger Delta during the time after the Bakassi incident had been resolved. There was some commotion and anger, but it has calmed down to the point where in a conference in 2017 in Abuja, February 28, 2017, the Nigerian Civil Society has inserted what I call the solution to our problem, which was they inserted in their resolution a clause where they recommended that the federal government should invoke the ancient principle of which is called otipotitis juris, which is a principle of territoriality, so as to intervene on a matter. It simply meant that they will have to ask Cameroon, how come you are insisting that your borders end at Bakassi, which is where Ambazonia's border end with Nigeria, whereas your borders at the time of independence end at Mongo? They have not been able to answer that question. That question can only be answered by the Republic of Ambazonia, the constitutionally originated and the legally validated sovereignty, which was consciously introduced in our polity to solve our nemesis. But unfortunately, we are now conducting what I call sovereignty clueless and constitutionally devoid politics, which is the reason why we precipitated into this action that is causing problem right now and back home. Until we reverse our struggle and come back to the basics of how to acquire power, which is through the sovereign state. And the sovereign state must be argued so that any country can handle us without being accused for intervening in the internal affairs of a country. We are not going to make it.
Well, thank you, Ed, for that. I was patient with you because I know that it's a very complex issue and you have the knowledge of the origin. So we wanted to get that out. You've touched on a couple of points, and we have Dr. Nwankwo here, who's also an international, an international lawyer, scholar on international law. So Dr. Nwankwo, just listening to Ed going through that narrative and touching on some of the issues that demonstrate the very close relationship between the Cameroons and Nigeria. What are your thoughts on how this EndSars movement, which, as alluded by one of the panelists, Dr. Osong, is now evolving into a Change Nigeria movement? How do you see this playing out within the context of the international arena, but also within the context of the geopolitics in the Gulf of Guinea? You know, you have what's going on in the Cameroons. You have the conflict over there in Central African Republic. You have Chad over there, and Nigeria and Cameroon both dealing with Boko Haram. So how does all of this play out?
Well, thank you, Chebs. And I think Edwin spoke brilliantly. I was just nodding my head when he mentioned the uti possidetis juris principle, which is customary international law, that he who possesses keeps in the aftermath of a conflict. But I think what is playing out, there's so many trouble spots in the region. And I think what is playing out transcends socioeconomic issues, as we would like to call it. You know, there are certain external factors. Of course, we can go back in time and start to trace what some consider the nemesis of our problem, which is the arbitrary demarcation of boundaries and the colonial interference. You know, some will tell you those from Bakassi, for instance, or from Ambazonia have more in common, you know, with someone in the Niger Delta from Cross River and Akwa Ibom states. But that's a story for another day. But I think there are a myriad of factors responsible. One is, which is the most obvious, is bad leadership in the region. You know, in Nigeria, for instance, we were, you know, before 2015, we so much demanded, you know, a strong figure. We felt as though the former leadership was not mean enough, or for lack of a better word, was not strong enough to deal with the various interests. But like we see now, which is what I'm alluding to, it's overwhelmed everybody. You know, there are 26 military bases of Western countries around the African continent, you know, and within, you know, 2 days ago, the US Navy Team SEAL 6 entered Nigeria territory to rescue a US citizen. So any semblance of sovereignty that we think we have as African states, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, like it is from inception, is only a ruse, really, because there's no real sovereignty. And that is why it's important that we now take it upon ourselves, like Ken has said, that we start to demand this change. And that is why forums like this are important, you know, that we start to call a spade, name the problem as it is. You know, that for so long in Nigeria, for instance, for a country that is so blessed, you know, with so much solid minerals and natural resources, we've become a petro state. And in the nearest future, the petroleum will not even be that relevant anymore. And that the world is moving on. So what would you have? Now we have the menace of insecurity. You still have the political elite not paying enough attention. And that is why the EndSars protest is crucial at this point in our history. The first time that youth have come together across ethnic and religious divide to demand for a better country. Although it started as protest over police brutality, but it has metamorphosed. It's become a movement now. And I think Dr. Osong has a point as well. You know, both parties have stated their cases very well, and none is to be taken for granted. Nigeria is over 200 million people. Just imagine the humanitarian crisis that would happen to neighboring countries should Nigeria implode. You know, most of the Western countries and even China have been practicing how to remove their citizens from Nigeria. And I hate to carry this news, but many expect that Nigeria would implode. So we have to find a balance. When I discuss with youth who are activists, you know, who have some sort of platforms, I tend to tell them to be cautious. You know, yes, we are clamoring for a better state, but we have to be strategic. We're talking about the Lekki massacre that's just happened. Something else is happening in Rivers State for which we don't even have facts. And the Nigerian military has a history of killing, maiming innocent Nigerians. It's happened since democracy, I can count. We don't even have to go back to the military regime. You have the massacre in recent memory. You have the killing of 1,000 Shiites, which Amnesty International reports proved that over 1,000 people were killed because they had a separate religious belief, and they did not even their constitutional guaranteed right to freely congregate and worship has become an state. So we have to find the middle ground. Not only is it important, in the case of EndSars, it was organized and strategic. And hello?
Yeah, keep going. We can hear you.
Yes, so I think Ed and Dr. Osong have both made valid points. On one hand, we have to carry on the activism, you know, get our message out there, negotiate with the government, but we also have to be careful, you know, of making remarks that can be overboard or spreading information that is yet to be verified. I think there's a fine line. between that and the potential for Nigeria to implode and there's a humanitarian crisis in the sub-region. That would not, even the case of Ambazonia would be, negatively impacted should Nigeria implode.
Chaps, I want to let me opine here. Thank you, Dr. Nwankwo, for that. I want to make the audience very clear about something. The EndSars movement is a domestic movement geared at changing the leadership of a country. The middle class and those on the edge of society have felt the marginalization so much, and marginalization here, we're not making light of it, the brutality, the killing, the exclusionary processes that the elites have unleashed on them, the depravity and the scarcity that comes out of a culture that creates a very wide chasm between haves and have-nots, and between those who have privilege, rank, and power, that seek to cause havoc on those less able. So within the construct of a national movement, a domestic uprising ensues. Let me be clear to the audience. The Southern Cameroonians, Ambazonians, are a people with territorial integrity. As Edwin just mentioned, in 1961, a country came into its full independence called La République du Cameroon, with its borders sealed pursuant to Article 47 of the AU Charter, which calls for borders being inviolable. So, in the furtherance of our cause, we try very desperately to say to the world and to all sympathizers and people who want to see the justice brought to people who today are under genocidal attack, that we have territorial integrity, we have sovereignty, we are the only country that achieved independence consistent with UN 1608, but yet have never experienced and benefited from the fruits of that independence. And that is why you heard Ed mention some precedents like the Green Tree Accord, where the Republic of Cameroon was asked to retreat and take its military to its borders as attained at the time of independence. Why I interjected to make this point is to clarify for our audience. Ours is an international.
We are losing you there a little bit, Dr. Osong. Okay, we will get back to Dr. Osong, but Ken, I wanted to bring you in here. This panel is duly constituted because we are solution-focused individuals. We identify the problem, we try to see how we can help. And I think for our viewers, it will be really beneficial if we discuss that kind of solution-driven conversation, because we can then bring them in to see how they can assist no matter where they are in the world. Ken, from your point of view, you run an organization that promotes business engagement between Canada and Nigeria, for example, Africa and Canada, for example. So when you as an entrepreneur and as an activist look at this, what sort of solutions do you think come to mind in terms of what the youth should be doing, what advocates should be doing, what allies should be doing to try to drive us towards solutions?
Thank you, Chaps. So I think for me, looking at this, it's like typically you hear a lot of people say, they talk about the fact that I don't get involved in politics. It's not my thing. But I tell people, you can't bring about change without getting involved in politics. So if you're an activist and you want to just say, you know what, I'll focus on my activism, I wouldn't, get involved, even if it's indirectly politics. Then obviously you don't seem to understand the complexities of, of the issues we face, especially within the West Africa region or the African as a whole. So for me, I think I tend to look at this in terms of going back to the root cause of an issue, because that's typically the first step in terms of then analyzing and then working your way forward to what could be like sustainable solutions to this issue. So in the Nigerian situation, obviously, like I've said, people have rated various leaders, from the early 70s to date, and I have said it that the leadership has been failing. And they've not stopped failing. They've been doing that. And it's interesting because there's a lot of agitation around the fact that, we need younger leaders. At the end of the day, we are sick and tired of the present generation who have been there. A lot of them took over power when they were in their early 30s. And, right now they feel like, if you're not 55 or 60, close to retirement or pension, then you shouldn't be able to, take up any senior leadership position within the government. But I tend to think about the fact that we as youth, there's a lot of movement. We're pushing towards, being able to take control of our future and being able to sit at the tables in terms of making some of these decisions that would affect us and our generation to come. But there is a lot of, inward looking as well. So basically what that means is if we look around, like in terms of the way the government is structured in Nigeria, there are a couple of people who are maybe in their early 40s, late 40s, whom you could classify as youth as well. But obviously the situation which we have been facing is the fact that it's just bigger than the age. So being a youth does not automatically place you in a position where your moral compass will typically be positioned in a way where you take decisions which are probably in the best interest of other people. So there is a lot of orientation that is needed across Nigeria as a country. There's a lot of orientation. That's the first thing. The second thing is the fact that we need to start listening. Leadership needs to start listening. What is peculiar about this particular protest is there are people who traditionally do not get involved in protests or activists that got into this. And that is typically the middle class. Because if you think about it, the middle class are the most, especially in Nigeria, we tend to underestimate their capacity for tolerance. So even when you think things are so bad in Nigeria, they find a way. They keep finding a way. And the people at the bottom have been crying for years. But guess what? Right now is a situation where the middle class for once got fed up. And that's why you see this whole implosion, using like semi-implosion, using like trying to quote Dr. Nwankwo. That's how you see some of these things kickstarting. Because the middle class has gotten to a tipping point and they say, you know what? We cannot continue like this. And guess what? The middle class, they have the resources financially. They have the voice, amplified, social media, what have you, international connection with diaspora. That's why you have seen the level of publicity we have witnessed in terms of this whole thing going on. So for me, I think the middle class needs to keep going. They need to keep going. I think gradually it's going to move up to, move away from just, physical protests like we have seen to more intellectual. There'll be a lot of more intellectual activism. Right now, as we speak, there's a lot of structuralization going on. People are talking of creating political parties, movements in preparation for 2023 election, which is where everyone is looking at the fact that hopefully we can produce more vibrant individuals, as we chart the future of our country. But I think for me, the most exciting part of this is that people don't seem to understand the mental revolution going on amongst the youth in Nigeria. There is a lot of change mentally. People, for once, have started seeing things from a totally different perspective. Like Dr. Nwankwo said, right now, everyone has moved away from the whole Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa type of thing, Muslim, Christian. Everybody has seemed to understand that the oppressors share one thing in common. They are united. So how come the victims stay divided? So that for me is a huge change. And that for me is a strong indication of the mental revolution which is going on, which as long as we keep it sustained, I don't really know how things are going to pan out because no one knew that this protest was going to just kickstart or get to this level. But for me, I think as long as that discussion keeps staying within that context and people keep their headspace within this whole thing of zero religion, zero tribe, zero personal or vested interest, the key thing is collectively we have an issue. And that issue is that bad leadership, the same individuals who have been ruling and who don't seem to care about the nation. Let's also not forget the fact that most of these individuals have actually prepped their children and their proxies or any sort of thing in preparation to continue from where they have stopped. So these are also some parts of it where we have to keep our eyes open, because some of these individuals could prop up and start acting as leaders for the youth, and before you know it, you are back to square one, and we have like a vicious circle. So going forward, I just think the youth need to keep the movement going. They need to keep the engagement levels going. They need to keep focused, and hopefully we can get the anticipated or get the desired change which we've been clamoring for.
Well, that was good, Ken. Let me throw this down to Ed and Dr. Osong. So you've heard what they've said. My question to you is, draw a contrast. Do you think it is easier to achieve the goals as stated by Ken and Dr. Nwankwo compared to within the Nigerian movement compared to the Ambazonia movement, because of the very fact that ours is an issue that requires international intervention?
I think we cannot make any comparison. One has its own system. Nigerian change process is within the system. It's not challenging the sovereignty. We have to be clear that it is a change process which is now, as Ken and Dr. Nwankwo has said, is accepted. It's almost being made into a class system. It's the oppressed versus the oppressors. And there's some indication that their civil society are alert as to how to manage it properly so that it does not get exploited by the usual divide and rule forces that are normally prone to stoking ethnicity and religion. I saw a letter that was signed by over 100 who is who in Nigeria, and that is a very good indication that this thing is no longer going to be exploited as a North-South thing or as a Christian and all that stuff. We pray that it takes this trajectory. If you notice also, I read something from Governor of Kaduna, El-Rufai, who gave some write-up, and it was published. They were basically stating their frustration as to why the current government has not implemented and he used a word that I heard for my first time, rebalancing. You normally hear about restructuring. There's this call for restructuring of Nigeria, which is basically a constitutional conference where people will come and decide how to make this country perform as it should perform. And from the way it's presented, it is an indication that if all the good thinkings in Nigeria, and there are thousands of them, are given the opportunity, this country will take its rightful place in the world. And that's what we are praying for. But compare that to Cameroon. Have you seen anything from the La Republique side? Have you seen any movement? Have you seen any organization that has passed some kind of resolution condemning the genocidal war that has been inflicted on the Ambazonian people? I have not. I've been scanning the environment. I've seen nothing since the war began in 2017. The actual one, they've been oppressing us since 1961. And they've been subjugating us, which is the ultimate form of oppression. And I don't need no war to prove my case. The Francophone society is particularly allergic to democracy. because they know that to the extent that country is democratic is how easier it will be for these so-called quote-unquote Anglophones to live. Case closed. Let Anglophones have no illusions about that country. I don't even understand why we have people still having to be talking about negotiating or dialoguing with them. The dialogue that they understand is only a dialogue that will preserve the territorial integrity of Cameroon. It's a pro-Cameroon solution type dialogue. What happened with the CDN people, whatever that is, compared for
Coalition for Dialogue and Negotiation.
If they came out with a survey that said over 80% of the people wanted independence. The language does not speak the independence language because they were constituted by federalists. I don't blame them. They don't have any reason to advocate for our cause. It was their own survey. But when they went to make a report, they used the wrong terminology. Autonomy. What is autonomy? Autonomy means nothing. We Ambazonians need to go back to the basics of what should be the easiest way of explaining this problem to anybody in the world, whether you come from planet Mars today. The English-speaking people, the indigenous English-speaking people of a territory that used to be called by United Nations the Trust Territory of Southern Cameroon under United Kingdom administration, which is the Ambazonian people, came into a confederation which has failed, period. And we can no longer tolerate that because that system was hopefully brought back, that the system was brought into place by people who thought they could have a relationship, but it were ill-advised. So the only question now is for Cameroon to evacuate its forces, its presence from Republic of Ambazonia, the sovereign state that was constitutionally originated and legally invited. This is a subtext because we are confusing the international community by our inability to present the true story of our existence in this sub-region, how the politics has evolved, and what the solution is. The solution is not going and creating more groups and more political entities. The solution is simply restating the truth. And stating the history is where you find the truth. Most Ambazonians skip certain portions of our history for political reasons. I've seen this over and over. They are not helping the cause. Why would you make a statement that we got independent in 1961? How can that be? What were you between 1960 and 1961? Only subjects of international law can treat with each other and engage in treaties. The plebiscite pact was a treaty, if you do not know that. Our leader had a treaty, which was a plebiscite pact, to form a confederation. Confederations are tactical alliances for a particular objective. It has failed. Leave us alone. Let these people go and return to their status quo ante, which is what they were in 1960, on October 1, 1960. But I do not even blame the Francophones or the French Cameroon because it is ourselves who have been unable to tell this true story. When we went to Nigeria and had the conclaves, we made every effort to have people sign on to what we call the constitutionality doctrines. They signed it in the first conclave, they signed it in the second conclave, but when we came at the third conclave, all hell broke loose because Cameroon was so fearful that the trending of the famous Kakuf enterprise was going to finally coalesce at the point where our polity will now subscribe to the sovereignty doctrine, which is our nemesis right from day one. They sabotaged it, and they brought in their agent provocateurs, and they took off and veered off, where we now have this problem in our struggle where we have a bifurcated interim government number 8. The number 8 government since 1984, when the successor state in the Republic of Ambazonia took over that sovereignty. We have had 7 successive governments in this Ambazonian territory. We have one now which is calling himself Federal Republic of Ambazonia, whereas Republic of Ambazonia is on the other hand. Do you know what that has done to the world? It has made us the laughing stock, the very laughing stock, and Nigerians know it. And that is why we are doing ourselves a disservice to get back, as you said, solution-oriented. Ambazonia should start just doing one thing and one thing alone. Respect the history of your own, your relationship in that in which state we were unable to serve our best interests, or what is this? And respect the truth. If we do that, everything will be okay. I do not understand why that has not happened.
All right, very well put, and I think we're digging in deeper as we're talking and uncovering more. But I want to bring in the other folks into the conversation. Dr. Nwankwo, so yes, so we've made a distinction between the two movements, but they are going on parallelly. And one of the things that was cited by Dr. Osong at the beginning is that there was some hope and reliance that Nigeria, being the big brother on the continent, would sort of rise up and assist Ambazonian people in a way. Ed knows this because he's been doing a lot of work in Nigeria on this front. But so how does this transformation to change Nigeria now that is brewing, what do you think that does to all of the other let me call it problems around the continent, where people were looking up to Nigeria and hoping that Nigeria would be that shining light that could trigger the beginning of change?
Well, of the EndSars protest is not lost. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I said I think it's probably too early for us to call it what direction the EndSars protest will go in terms of its impact in other African countries. So far, like Ken has alluded to, I think what is brewing in Nigeria is a movement that is unprecedented by virtue of how organized it is, and with social media, it's been able to catch on. And that in itself is a lesson to other African states, who have such injustices as Nigeria. But of course, there are peculiarities. In the case of Ambazonia, it's transcended, like Edwin has said, internal agitations for reforms. This is now a question of the freedom of a nation within a nation. Sovereignty is clear in international law, and this is not even an issue of self-determination. If we start to examine the treaties and documents, which brought this current entity as we know it as Cameroon together. So I think it's a different perspective which one should look at from international law as to how the entity known as Ambazonia can gain its independence, so to speak, because that is a different ball game from what is transpiring in Nigeria. But when the Arab Spring happened, for instance, in the Arab world, it didn't really catch on in sub-Saharan Africa. But with Nigeria, we would have to see how it goes, because I can tell you that this is not the end of it. People want accountability. People want a better country for the youth. And then you have to look at it from a wider perspective. From this now, the next protests from the news, people are talking about the politicians, the political class cutting down on the cost of governance. So it's sweeping change, and it's something that would last for longer than we can even tell. And it's a good example for other African states. But what we have to do as academics, as activists, in the case of Ambazonia, is for us to continue to voice the problem that is there. We have to call the attention of the international community to it, because I feel as though enough coverage is not given to it. And while the Nigerian situation continues, while it's ongoing, it's also important that we emphasize the Ambazonian situation and also make that distinction that it's not necessarily here there is not enough news coverage to show the level of carnage that is going on. And when there is boots on ground in any part of a territory or in another independent country, if we like to put it that way for the purpose of this debate, then of course we know that war crimes are going on. Genocide, if you like, when it gets to that level. I don't want to go into the technicality of it under international law, but at least we can ascertain that the government is being high-handed for what is a legitimate cause, what is just, the right of a people to determine their own states and live as the Republic of Ambazonia. So what we have to do on our side in Nigeria is to realize that these causes, though they are happening at the same time, have different levels to it. And we have to also play our part in ensuring that the attention of the international community is called to it as we explore diplomatic and other channels to ensure that the crimes that are being perpetrated there come to an end, and the people of Ambazonia can be a self-determined state.
Can I add to that real quickly, chaps? Can I just add real quickly to that so I don't miss that point?
Yes, add to it and also start with the role of the diaspora.
Okay, so I think, and I really like the point that Osong made earlier around, the fact that, it's the timing, Ambazonia kind of like, it's important for Nigeria to be in a state of stability so that, they can rise up in terms of, supporting the movement. But I think we need to distinguish between who should be supporting the movement. So we're talking about the people supporting the Ambazonia movement, not the Nigerian leadership, because they are not better. It's not, I don't sugarcoat my words. I say it as it is. And we have to be very clear. There are a lot of peculiarities, even though it might not be at the same level or in terms of, the whole territoriality thing, it might not be at that same level. But the key thing is there's the oppressor and there's the oppressed. So how do we expect two individuals or two entities who share the same characteristic to stand against each other? Obviously not. So basically, that distinction has to be there, that it's you and I, a lot of us out there in Nigeria, civil society, activists and all of that have to support our Ambazonian brothers and sisters in terms of amplifying what is going on, the genocide and all of that, push it out there so that the international community, everyone can understand the depth or the extent, in terms of all the oppression going on there. But as for the leadership, I don't expect much from most of the leaders in the region because, they've always been, they sit at their tables, they have their small communities, which most of us are not aware of. But obviously, like you have to remove the speck from your eye before you go to someone else. So that's one thing. And back to the role of the diaspora, which you just spoke about, I think for the first time, there's been a lot of, coordinated effort between the Nigerian diaspora and, our brothers and sisters back home, which is the same sort of thing I've witnessed in the Ambazonia movement. People like yourself, Chef, you actually got me so interested in the whole Ambazonia thing because I didn't really have a lot of knowledge. And then when we chatted and you told me about it, I've been following a lot of the happenings and all of that. So in the Nigerian situation, there's been a lot of coordination from these two arms, which historically, there's been a lot of disconnect and mistrust from, the diaspora and some of our comrades back home. But in this situation, they've come together, they've come to realize that at the end of the day, what affects us, diaspora also affects those of our brothers and sisters back home. So the good thing is a lot of diaspora people, they have all of this whole international network, international connections, and they have put it into good use in terms of, amplifying the voices of our comrades back home who are like the true heroes and heroines because, they've been out there in the, in the sun, in the rain, protesting. We can sit in the comfort of our homes in Canada and analyze some of these issues, and we don't have to fear much about safety. People back home, it's a different ball game. We have witnessed extrajudicial killings at the different levels. It's not uncommon for people who speak up to have one label or one crazy case put on, in terms of trying to make them, to silence them and all of that. So obviously that connection has been created. The diaspora has been very, supportive. Every one of us, we desire a good Nigeria, we desire a good Africa, we desire a good Ambazonia, a good Cameroon. This is what everyone, it's not too much to ask. But at the end of the day, everything still comes to self-interest, resource control. That's what all of this is all about. Because at the end of the day, when individuals sit back and what you might think is the right thing, it's so easy to, to implement, or it's easy to action. when they sit back and draw all the calculations to understand what they tend to lose, then you find them taking another stand. It's really, really they cannot comprehend what they have always seen as their birthright, what they have always felt like they're entitled to. But guess what? It would not be business as usual. That I know. There's a mental revolution going on across Africa. And like Dr. Nwankwo alluded to earlier, we saw what happened with the Arab Spring. And obviously it's different school of thoughts have taken different stand in terms of what was the success. Hopefully we might not have the same type of rap, but one thing I know, there's a lot of awakening. And somehow some of these situations going on across the region, no matter how unconnected they might sound, they will start connecting at some point, because the true battle is between the oppressed and the oppressors.
Very powerful. Dr. Nwankwo, I'll let you come in. I know you have to leave. Thank you so much for joining us this late. But I'll let you come in and speak to us and then give us a final word. And I'll throw this in there so that you can marry it into your comments. How do we, especially for those of you who are on the continent, you see all the agitations here around Black Lives Matter and all of these uprisings that went on around the world. You know, oftentimes when we look at it, we turn around and we say, okay, but you know, can anybody do more for the continent? Can you, in your comments, also talk about how we can make these two things sync better? Because it seems like there's often a disconnect between the people here who fight for all, you know, whether it's Black people or, people of African descent, versus when it comes down to the nitty-gritty on the continent, who's actually fighting for the change.
Well, I think thanks, Chebs, for having me, and I'll just give my parting shot. I think what Ken said is very, very instructive in the sense that we shouldn't expect intervention from the political class in all these battles we're trying to fight. Because if, for instance, the Nigerian government supports the Ambazonian state, in the minds of the political class, they are creating a precedent for other similar movements, if you like. If you say you support Ambazonia, that means you've admitted that the independent people of Biafra have a right to self-determination and can call for a referendum, because that's what it means. So when it comes to the political class, we shouldn't really expect anything from them. What we have to do is, thankfully, we have the social media. It's a globalized world. We can try to sensitize other Africans, African youth, if you like, from across every other boundary, be it in Africa and in the diaspora. And when it comes to Black Lives Matter, I don't think the quest for justice is a universal one, whether it's Black Lives Matter in the United States, whether it's EndSars. So I think we saw what happened from an economic point of view. The year of return, we saw how it bore fruit for Ghana. So if the African American is successful, or if the Nigerian is successful, has a country where he lives freely, and then the same thing happens in Ambazonia, in Cameroon, I think it will augur well for all of us. So we have to be supportive of each other, irrespective of the boundaries are even artificial. If you go back in time, you know, there are colonial boundaries. I started by making reference to the arbitrary demarcation of boundaries. You know, in my field where we research regional integration in Africa, we tend to go back. And that's somewhat what we're looking for at the continental level. We've signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We have the African Economic Community and the Lagos Plan of Action. All these things are still gearing towards collapsing boundaries, because we realize that we are much more formidable as a group together in unison than when we start to operate on the basis of states, which we didn't even most of us did not negotiate the terms of these states. We saw how it went wrong in Cameroon and Ambazonia. It's almost similar in Nigeria. I don't want to bore you to go back to the amalgamation of the North and Southern Protectorate. It was for administrative convenience, you know, for colonial interests. And then Nigeria discovered oil. We know that the civil war in Nigeria was partly a war fought over interest over Nigeria's rich oil fields, and that continues till this day. So for the purposes of this this current chat, I would end here. I think it's important that there is synergy. You know, you're doing what I would like to say is brilliant and is really commendable by pulling together, you know, common minds so that we can chart a way forward in our respective environments. And I think it's important that we continue to do so. And I'm always glad to be considered to share my view on this platform.
Well, thank you, Doctor. You're always welcome on this platform. And I believe there's many, many conversations that we will have. And hopefully those conversations would ferment some of the solutions. Thank you for joining us tonight. And
thank you.
We'll be seeing you soon. And over to, if any of the other folks who are on want to come on and contribute, you're more than welcome to do so. Just turn your camera on and we'll give you a chance to speak. But Ed, let me throw back that question down to you that I just threw, and to perhaps Dr. Osong. How do we, so yes, we have these agitations going on, we have these change movements progressing, but there is a dire need and desire for the change to be made concrete. People want to see the change real in their lives, even as the change is happening. So how do we draw on these different energies so that there is synergy, whether it's the EndSars now evolving into a Change Nigeria movement, drawing both from the diaspora, drawing both from within Nigeria, but from around the continent, to ensure that we channel that message, that we are dismantling the old colonial systems that have held us in bondage for this while. Because I think that is the way we frame a rallying point. All of us can agree that the colonial systems, even though we have gained independence, still continue to perpetuate injustice to date. And rather than us, somebody said something, I think that was Dr. Osong at the outset, when she talked about the fact that we end up in a situation where black and black fighting each other, when, you know, the people who cause these issues are simply standing by, and to some extent we are looking up to the same countries to come and help. So how do we build this sense that we are done with colonialism and colonial structures and the rudiments of colonial structures that continue to divide and perpetuate injustice, and that we want to work together despite the uniqueness of the issues in various parts of the continent, that we are united together in bringing down these structures.
Is that for me?
I'm throwing it to you and to Ed and to anyone who wants to jump in on it.
Oh, okay. Let me venture here, MCHEPS. I think Dr. Nwankwo and yourself have actually gone to the root to answer the question here. At the root of the EndSars movement is a concept of injustice. At the very root of the Ambazonia conflict between with La République du Cameroon is the concept of injustice. It is because there is an unjust structure being imposed on a people that has now resulted in what we are seeing, a full-scale war and a genocide. But let me say here that there is the one thing that we have to think about is that a common humanity rides on injustice anywhere not being tolerated, as they say. So if I may throw an appeal out there to our panelists as well as to the audience, is that just like with the EndSars, our brothers in Nigeria
have to rally, as we do on social media and elsewhere, rally to show our support. But in our case, they can go one step further. They can call on their governments as well as other civil society bodies to take up strong resolutions condemning what is going on in Ambazonia, calling for the international community to come to intervene to mediate or to reinforce existing mediation, as in the case of the Swiss-led peace process, that goes to address the root causes of the crisis so as to find a lasting solution. And they must also call for the United Nations to impose a ceasefire and take measures to put boots on the ground so as to end the humanitarian crisis. Those are some things that our brothers on the West in Nigeria, I know they're embroiled in existential problems as well. They can also help. So for those of us who are, as we say, distant from the front lines, we can do those things. So if there's something that we can do in terms of constructive solutions, is to engage and work for a common humanity, because injustice anywhere is not to be tolerated by good, loving people. So here is an offer and an action that people can take. They can call for robust measures to be taken now, not later. They can write to their own governments, pressuring them to take on resolutions that forces the belligerents to come to the table once and for all, address the root causes in an internationally third-party mediated environment.
Ed?
I can add two things here. On the one note, the Republic of Ambazonia, and right now on the platform where I operate, which is Ambazonia Recognition Collaborative Council, which is the entity that was created to correct the problems that happened when the Skakov enterprise was sabotaged at Zaria. We believe that we've been doing some inroads in the diplomatic actions in Nigeria, Ghana, and Sierra Leone, right? And in September 16, 2019, at Abuja, the Abuja Declaration created EndSars, which is Nigeria and Ambazonia Sovereignty Recognition Society. This is made up 100% of Nigerians, ordinary Nigerians who believe in the independence of Republic of Ambazonia based on the facts. And that will go a long way to help calm the fears of what has always been, I call it the blackmail card that has always been used in our struggle, especially in Nigeria, that if to the extent that the federal government sympathizes or works with in seeking recognition or helps Ambazonia, also will be an excuse for other secessionist movement within Nigeria. Well, you see, that's why at the beginning I said our case is unique. We have a unique case which we would like to present it in the context of its history, its politics, and its geography. And whereas the other cases may have some other nuances that are germane to the context of their own domestic situation, we'd like to leave it at that, so that it does not mean that Nigeria cannot support justice in the Gulf of Guinea. That was why that conference took place, insecurity conference on the insecurity in the Gulf of Guinea, and that's why they adopted that resolution on February 28 in Abuja, recommending the federal government to invoke the ancient principle of territoriality as the handle to unilaterally intervene on our matter. And we have made those inroads. We believe that the same thing is happening in other countries that I mentioned, Ghana and Sierra Leone, which are the three countries targeted, Anglo-Saxon countries. Whereas most people like to throw in this context of Pan-Africanism. I think if you look at it, we could be the poster child of Pan-Africanism, but let's face it, Pan-Africanism has to respect basic individual freedoms, basic rights of communities that are seeking self-determination, and they should always acquiesce to justice and the rule of law. It can never be a political enterprise, as most time it tends to be, because there are cases where some people have tended to overlook our case because they claim that the Ambazonia will be balkanizing Africa. No, you cannot build freedom out of oppression. Ambazonia should be the poster child of any Pan-Africanist in the world. They should be stamping out and saying Republic of Ambazonia should be recognized immediately, because that is how freedom will thrive across Africa. And only when the individual person is free to move from point A to point B across anywhere in Africa without fear of being cast as an of not being of the same ethnicity or of the nationality, should we be even thinking now that we will have something moving in the direction of African unity. But that is something that is hopeful, and we think that we have presented the information right there. The problem I'm always having, and I think I should let the audience know, is that the problem rests with Ambazonians. Ambazonians have been unable to articulate their cause as clearly as it should be. They have tended instead to politicize it. Unfortunately, that is a terrible thing, to come into a struggle at a juncture without setting time aside to study it. For perhaps you were unaware of facts, or perhaps you were unaware of principles that support those facts, but you seem to have a lot of people behind you and you think that will work. It won't work, because our case is that of the creation of a state. It's a revolutionary state. Revolutionary states do not lend themselves to democratic principles. It is incumbent on all to recognize that we need to respect this, because the international community knows our cause, they knows our matter, more than some of the leaders that go out there in public view and be talking about the cause. We should understand that they require that we ought to present them, they handle, and that is a word that we got here in the United States Subcommittee on Africa in 2006, when we were lobbying the United States. They told us to provide them the handle of which to hold our case. We have exhausted legal remedies, and this next stage of our revolution was to exhaust the psychology of our struggle, which is how to inculcate that sense of sovereignty, which is so devoid in our political culture, and at the same time explain to the world that these people deserve their sovereign rights as Republic of Ambazonia, meaning explaining it, lobbying the other countries. It is much easier to do the lobbying and explaining to the external part than to get the psychology of the Ambazonians to get out of its sovereignty clueless politicking, because all they do is thinking that they can out-politic somebody else and become the dominant team to bring a solution. But that hasn't worked, because the Cameroon, you cannot out-politic a Cameroon and the France combined, or the international community want us to simply state the facts. And I believe that the solution rests in what we have already proposed. It is out there so many times. Ambazonians should create their own correspondent sovereignty recognition society. When the people went on the streets on September 20, 2017 and shouted, Ambazonia has risen to fall no more. Unfortunately, the balloons are now sinking, because the diaspora, who was supposed to be the vanguard of our revolution, have not taken up that mantle that Ambazonia has risen to fall no more. To make Ambazonia rise to fall no more, we need to connect the sovereignty message across the board. So what better way to do is to create the Ambazonian Sovereignty Recognition Society, which is called EndSars. Wherever you are, all you need is yourself as the anchor person and 4 individuals who could be of any nationality, and you are ready to promote that message to the world that we are a separate, distinctive people with our inalienable and immutable and indestructible rights. That message will now call for that recognition or for the granting of the exclusive referendum. We already know that that has been an indication because the United Kingdom House of Lords, under the auspices of Lord Boateng and Viscount Waverley in 2018, promoted that principle of intervention through peacekeeping force in our territory. And they cited the 1964 Cairo Treaty, which brought out the principle of territoriality in AU Article 4B. Countries, Republic of Cameroon should be called upon to maintain its boundaries as obtained at its time of independence on January 1, 1960, so that the Republic of Ambazonia, whose independence was obtained upon trusteeship termination on October 1, 1960, should be let to go. If we cannot have recognition on that basis, then let these people be granted an exclusive referendum, just like Russia did for Crimea, or they're attempting to do for northeastern Ukraine, and it has also been done in other parts of the world.
The EU being the biggest one. Ed,
yeah.
I know you want to talk about this, the EU being the biggest one, letting Britain go. I mean, I'm jumping in here, and we have Mr. Lawal, who's just joined us, so he'll be coming on to talk. But yeah, while we are here, let's point out certain inconsistencies or certain things that are worth observing. So how come it is that, you know, the European Union, Britain says that they no longer want to be part of the European Union, and they are not fighting a war. They simply had debates upon debates and then prescribed a process for Britain to take himself out. I don't see France fighting Britain with a gun. I don't see the other European countries attacking Britain with guns. So why is it that this kind of solutions that the West often prescribes for itself, which they can facilitate the same prescriptions in the continent of Africa? I mean, we've been in a conflict state for 4 years. There's been over 15,000 lives lost. There's been over 1 million children, school children, who have not been able to go to school for 4 years. There's been over 800,000 internally displaced, a lot of them who have sprawled over to Nigeria and to other neighboring countries. And yet, all we have is the international community saying, well, the AU should do something. We condemn the deaths of these children. We condemn the killings. We condemn this. We condemn that. But we don't see any active action being taken to prescribe the same solutions that they use when it happens in their own backyards. And this might actually be something that goes both ways. Why can't we Africans, you know, use, I mean, many of us live here out in the West, and we see how these things operate. So why is it so difficult? Why do we always have to resort down to fighting with the gun? So I'm throwing that out to the panel. And I'm also throwing this out there for you to consider as you respond. Are there elements within the EndSars movement is there any resistance from certain classes within Nigerian society? Is there any resistance? Because we know that with the case of Ambazonia, as Ed was saying, and he keeps saying Ambazonia, there is a lot of pushback, but this pushback is coming from people who, although might see themselves, although were born within the territory called Ambazonia, but see themselves now to have become more Cameroonese, so much so that, you know, they can't fathom a separate and sovereign Ambazonia. So they push back. So do you see that element within the EndSars or as it's evolving into a change Nigeria movement? And then talk about the piece of the Western prescriptions.
If I might jump in here, Chaps, like I said earlier when I made you know, my comments, I did speak about the fact that and I mean, that's not to downplay or, you know, to undermine the efforts of, you know, a lot of people or individuals in this whole movement, both in terms of the Ambazonia, even the Nigerian situation, when we reach out to the West, we speak out to some of the big players, some of the colonial masters. But at the end of the day, we have to understand one thing, which is, in my years of looking at reading history and looking at what some of the trends are, everything is about vested interest. No Western country will step up in terms of getting involved in some of the local politics when they do not see how it will be beneficial to them. And then if you start to look at historically, what are some of the key benefits they have gotten from some of these regions, then you understand which of the crises, and you can actually tell what stand they will take in what most of these crises look like. So a good example is in Nigeria, we have the Biafra movement, which is maybe not, it's to an extent, there's a lot of peculiarities, there's a lot of similarities with the Ambazonia movement, but there's still some level of contradiction with that one, with the Biafra movement. But there's been this whole thing about, Great Britain, why are you not getting involved in this? There were a lot of extrajudicial killings that happened with the Biafra movement. People were killed, until date, no one has been brought to books or no one has been held accountable for the deaths of these individuals. But then think about it, like, where do you think the colonial masters will take a stand in Biafra? They wouldn't want a situation where Nigeria will break up, because obviously it makes a region they still control much more weaker. It's not in their interest. So the best they can do is to issue some diplomatic statements out there, like, we're observing keenly what is going on in Nigeria. So then it then begs the question, when we have things like EndSars, where we are talking about, we need to restructure Nigeria. Nigeria needs to break up, because by the way, that's part of some of the underlying messages which the EndSars movement carries, because the EndSars is just one tiny piece. It's just an outlet for the agitation for a restructured Nigeria, and some people are also on the path of breaking out totally, like moving, let all the different regions go and do their thing. But then where do we think some of the international community, what stand would they take? Because everything humanitarian which they might provide, or any sort of reprimand action which they might put out there, they still have to sit back and look at what is the politics behind it. What are the benefits? If they don't have direct benefits for them, just which side they will take. So that's one thing I have noticed, and that's one thing I think we should not really overthink, or we should set our expectations in terms of what we would be getting from the so-called international community. The expectation is really about creating awareness, bring the whole truth, ensure that everyone has equal voice in terms of the oppressors and the oppressed, in terms of what they are putting out there based on this is the number of people being killed, this is what is going on, there's an ongoing genocide in Ambazonia, this is what's going on with the EndSars. That's typically what the expectations are, put out the awareness, put out the truth out there. But in terms of looking up to them for to come up with solutions, which obviously you see how seamless they can do the Brexit, but then when it's our own situation, we have to resort to killing each other and shooting each other and sending military forces. And then it begs the question, aren't these human beings? It's all human beings, right? But then how come this is working here and this is not working here? How come you can't seem to, in the same way you intervene in so many issues, when your interest is being threatened, you cannot intervene in this sort of issue. You rather take a neutral ground. And we know when you don't speak in terms of oppression, then obviously you are part of the oppressor. So we have to be very, very clear. And I have said it and I've kept saying, and I don't really blame the individual, because at the end of the day, it's all international politics. It's all about interests. But we just need to manage our expectations in terms of what we think we want to get from the international community.
This is a long battle. Fellow viewers, if you're watching, just joining us, this is Unfiltered, and we've been having a very powerful conversation here on political change movements, what is happening in Nigeria, and the armed conflict that is unfolding in the southern Cameroons and Ambazonia, or for people who don't know that region or who refer to it as Cameroon. I want to see if any of the other viewers who are on want to contribute. If you want to do so, please just turn your camera on, and then that would indicate that you wanted to say something or join the conversation. But Ed, I'll throw this out there. We've had a very good conversation. I'm hoping that we're going to continue down on this series because there is a lot to talk about, and we're coming to the top of the hour there for the end of the show. But I want to throw this to you. What can you leave with the folks who are not Ambazonians, who do not know a lot about this issue, but who are beginning to take a keen interest and who are thinking, okay, these folks are talking about all these things. They're making some really important points. It appeals to me. I want to be able to do something to help, aside from just social media protest or going down to the street to protest. What substantively can folks do to help, whether it's with the EndSars or with Ambazonia?
With every change movement, you need to have it converted into action at some point in time. Otherwise, it may fizzle out. And that is always a situation with this type of change. We heard about the Arab Spring. Something happened in Tunisia eventually, or in Nigeria, but it did not work too well in Egypt. Now we're hoping in Nigeria that it should be considered as we are looking at it as a situation that is not vulnerable to the usual divide and rule tactics that are notorious for politicking in our sub-region, which is stoking ethnicity and stoking religion. From every indication, it has to be handled now by another class of people, dedicated elites who want to assist this mass movement. No mass movement usually end up affecting the change the desire unless it is redirected by some elites across history. It has always been the case. So we will hope that will be the case. As I mentioned at some point in time in the beginning, right, just looking at the literature review, it is appearing that the political leadership in Nigeria, even within the government, are taking notice and are making some indications that that will be the cause. So we are really hoping that it reaches the juncture where it will convert into actionable programs that will alleviate the problems that the youth wants. It could be a process, but let it be in that trajectory. Regarding our own context in Ambazonia, as I said, the similarities are not there. We have the dominant Francophone system, which has been completely mute. They have not lent themselves to a change process within their own situation. That's why they are able to tolerate two dictatorships for over 70 years. It is terrible. And people should not be worried that should not be alarmed, because the only reason why you will never see democracy in Cameroon is because they are associated it with the independence of Ambazonia. It is a clear logic. Frundi won the election in 1992 and he wasn't allowed to be president because Frundi is not a citizen of Cameroon. He's a foreigner. We are foreigners. We obtain Cameroonian nationality only by virtue of the existing confederation. As the confederation no longer exists, we are an annexed and subjugated people. The sooner Ambazonians get this in their head that they have been recolonized by a Black African country, perhaps that will enable them start to look at this matter in the lens of power, not the power which is brought in through those vices that has nothing to do with how you accumulate power, but from the real politic way, the better. That is not happening. Instead, what is happening is all attempts to infiltrate our revolution, which they have successfully done, distract us from focusing on the sovereignty message, which they have successfully done, and keep everybody from focusing on the rightful message, which we brought that upon ourselves when we failed to explain the true things that are happening, and we failed to explain our story. And by simply, if you come into a problem, and you have no knowledge about how what happened in 1960, you have no knowledge about what happened in 1966, 1972, or 1984, and you are made president of Federal Republic of Ambazonia, and you call your country and hyphenate it in mid-speech, Southern Cameroonians, Ambazonians, it is indicating to the people that we have been working with since 1984 that we have not matured. The only requirement that was granted us in 2013, well, this is off the record, so I can explain it. When in our lobbying efforts in Nigeria was one requirement: go get united. And that was granted to us because we had successfully exhausted those legal remedies, as I explained, and we won court. We also won a victory in Abuja High Court. So what they needed from this Ambazonian polity was the sense of now uniting, the sense of accepting that you are a different person from Cameroon. But that message has not been done because of our infighting and politicking. So those of you out there listening and supporting a Federal Republic of Ambazonia, you're basically shooting yourself in the foot, because that entity does not have the constitutional framework upon which any other country can handle our cause and not be accused for violating Article 4B, Article 2A of the United Nations, that is the non-interference, non-intervention of affairs and the internal affairs of countries. Countries all have their own skeleton in the closet. So we do not want to make our case be held hostage to that. That is the reason why the only venue for us securing an international awareness, and that will lead to intervention, is when we present the right message. That message has been provided us by United States, United Kingdom, South Africa, Nigeria, and even Ghana. But we fail to deliver it at each juncture when we come in with the politics. And I'm saying this because we have good relationships and we've done tremendous action in Nigeria. I'm explaining to you the Nigerian Ambazonia Sovereignty Recognition Society is being headed by a Nigerian Honorable Cletus Obun, and there are other indications that we can launch that in Ghana as soon as the COVID era gets over and one is able to move there, and also in Sierra Leone. People want to see this problem solved like yesterday. There's no reason for an African person to impose its will on its other person, and it claims that they are brothers. That's how we were being called in 1960, brothers in the East. What kind of brother would you refuse his rights when the relationship has failed? It is a problem now. It's a black on black crime, and we should accept it. We have been recolonized by the French Cameroon. We should start defining it as it is. We had our independence and we have lost that independence, and we are being recolonized. So perhaps that will enable us to understand that to be free from colonization is that we present ourselves as a people with a common history, whose rights to their sovereignty is the only venue, is the only handle which can be used by other parties to help us. Right now, the solutions are simpler. You can either recognize Republic of Ambazonia as a sovereign state, or you can grant that exclusive referendum to the indigenous English-speaking people of the Northwest and Southwest province as the permanent solution. A permanent solution cannot be conducted by an entity which has not recognized the constitutional framework like what was happening yesterday. And that is kind of wonderful, because you will be thinking of a permanent solution, but you're avoiding the source of the problem. You're trying to basically distract the international community from focusing on the crimes against humanity, which is currently taking place inside Ambazonia, where every day, no less than 10 boys, Ambazonians, are being killed by the ravaging Franco-Cameroonian military forces. But to solve this problem, we need to first acknowledge our own responsibility in how we have depleted power to ourselves. We cannot fight this war with nickeling and diming and GoFundMe in Facebook. That is not how it works. Had these people, had we considered all the aspects of our struggle, we would have known that the element of conflict existed. That is the reason why I said to you, we've exhausted the legal remedies. The next stage, which consisted of 60% of the course, was the psychology. And Ambazonian Rising to Fall No More actually accelerated that process as never would have been anticipated by our revolution. But what have we done to it? We've dropped that ball. So if we return back to the psychological stage and inculcate into our culture a sense of one Ambazonian people whose sovereignty is constitutionally originated and can be legally defended, and that would be Republic of Ambazonia, we would very, very easily accomplish that mission. And then the rest of the world will now be invited to do what they did for the goose, which is Brexit, by invoking Article 50 of the Maastricht Treaty, as they would have done to what they would be doing to the goose, which is Amba exit, by invoking Article 76B, and basically recognizing the fact that we have constitutional frameworks as to how our sovereignty is. We are not inventing our sovereignty, it is there. We have internationally recognized boundaries and we have the law. It is our lack of articulating this and associating it with the current processes of the world and in obeying best practices that has caused us this problem, where we think we can go and fight a Franco-Cameroonian military alliance by nickeling and diming ourselves, whereas recognition of sovereignty is going to bring us the billions of dollars that will immediately cause Cameroon to leave our territory without a whiff of gunshot being fired. But
okay, well, it's been a long, interesting conversation, and I know that we could keep going for very long because there is a lot to unpack, and I'm certainly promising that we've started this series. We've started with Nigeria and Ambazonia. We will keep it there, because certainly sub-Saharan Africa doesn't get a lot of attention, not at least in the media here when it doesn't involve our resources. It only gets the attention when it involves our resources, but otherwise it gets limited attention. We are glad that what is going on in Nigeria has garnered some media attention, largely because of the prowess of Nigeria in that region and in the world. So we hope that together as neighbors, as people who share a lot of commonalities. In fact, the former Southern Cameroon, as Dr. Osong referenced earlier, was once part of the Eastern Regional House in Enugu of Nigeria before we staged a walkout, which eventually led to an independent Southern Cameroon before the Federation. So there is a lot here that I would like to continue to explore with this panel. And with others who feel inspired to join, so that we can push this message out. So before I give you all an opportunity to put in your last word, I want to thank you for this time, and that we've really taken some time to educate, to instruct, and to inform people out there. Ken, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Ed, for a lot of insights. I really, personally, there's a lot of takeaways, from a lot of things which you have spoken about this evening. And I think most of the viewers as well would have felt the same way as well. I don't see Dr. Osong here, but I think she made a lot of great points as well, which I think has really thrown more light into the depth of the discussions we should really be having and what to look out for. Personally, I think same like the Ambazonia, same like the EndSars, it's a long road. It's not going to be easy. I don't think anyone who says it's going to be easy, is either delusional or not being realistic, or both, But I think the key thing is around sustained efforts, sustained effort. Keep rejigging the strategy as we progress, because remember, the oppressors are not sleeping. They keep re-strategizing as well. So we have to always be one step ahead of them. It's all about interest. It's all about resource control. It's all about their selfish, interests, basically. So having an understanding of the fact that all these issues which we are talking about, as we keep coming up with solutions, they would always keep throwing things in the wheels just to ensure that we are shunted in our progress. But they have to understand that this generation is different. And I think it's not going to be business as usual anymore. And we have demonstrated that. And I'm speaking now from the EndSars part of things. We have demonstrated that they have awoken a giant, you know, even some of the whole thing they've been talking about looting going on and the masses. And I keep saying it, you created the monsters. Some of these masses or some of the, you know, people at the lower echelons of the society whom you are complaining have been looting, you know, they become looters only when you don't need them. During elections, you have been using them for your election. So right now, you think about the fact that one day they have woken up and they are, you know, wreaking havoc and causing mayhem, and then you are complaining. These are citizens. No one chose that path, but you have been conditioning their mindset in a certain way. So now the chickens have come home to roost. So basically, everyone needs to understand that we all have a role. We all have a responsibility. Everyone on this, you know, Zoom call, everyone watching, listening, there should be no bystanders. You know, nobody should be standing, because if you stand, then you have chosen the path of the oppressor. So we all need to collectively keep working together. I like what is going on in Abuja, and I'll definitely do more research into how I can get involved, you know, in the Ambazonian association which they have put together, and obviously spread the word, because at the end of the day, there's a saying we say in Nigeria, you know, concern me, until it comes to bite you. So you feel like it's not your business. It's not your business until definitely somehow you find yourself involved in it. So we wouldn't stand back and watch, you know, our Ambazonian comrades go through this without at least not making effort to support them. So I'm appealing. And obviously for the EndSars protest as well, for, you know, it's a mutual, we need to have mutual contributions. So even for those on this call, I'm sure a lot of people have been following the event. We know what's going on. You know, we keep the fire going. We keep amplifying our voice. We use every tool at our resource. And also, I almost commend a lot of, there's been a lot of talk about the older generation relinquishing power, but I think there's been a lot of allies from the older generation. You know, one of them, Dr. Kalan Mayo, who, you know, he's like an uncle, a father. You know, he's been very supportive. He's on this Zoom call right now. But there are so many of them too who have actually listened that, you know, we think we have not done youth a favor. Some of us benefited from Nigeria in the 60s when it was good. You people were born into suffering. You've not enjoyed Nigeria for one single bit. So we can actually listen to your case. And we think that we would always join you in solidarity. So we also have to appreciate individuals like that who are, you know, at the forefront helping us move this. Hopefully, it's all about hope. You know, we hope, we are working, we are praying, you know, we are fighting, we are putting everything together. And, you know, somehow we hope for progress. We hope for the, you know, anticipated change we want, and we keep moving.
Thank you very well. Thank you very much, Ken. That was very well put. And I want to thank all of the viewers and all of our guests who have joined us on the Zoom call. Dr. Kyle Amayo, thank you so much. I'm hoping we'll be able to have you contributing next time on the show. Sister Abena, thank you for coming. And Sister Sonia, Temi, and the two galaxies. I don't see your name, but thank you. Ed, give us your final thoughts.
I really like to see the EndSars movement, which has, as I said, and everybody and the panelists has said, that is now being defined as a new Nigerian movement, succeed. And being so, I'll have to look at it in this context that the three processes of change can be identified. The only model that will be the best model for it to be used to make it happen for Nigeria, knowing its structure, will be the elitist model, quote unquote. I'm not saying that the elitists should come in and hijack it, but because there is three processes of change: the charismatic, of course, we may not have a one person who will come and swoop all over the entire Nigeria and make it happen, or the revolutionary, which we dare not see it happen. So we are forced to hope now that the elitist model of change, which is seeming as if it is gathering some momentum based on what I'm reading, when I'm seeing very prominent people, senators, ex-presidents, bishops, archbishops, and chiefs I mean, there was a long list I read in one of my chat groups that I belong to. Over 100 people have signed on to that this movement should be tolerated and a calm should return, which is all what we pray. And I hope that happens, which is where we are now. And then it brings me to looking at our situation. Ambazonians like to get involved in other countries' affairs. Remember the Ivory Coast situation where they're so intimately involved in issues with Ivory Coast and theirs. That is the nature. They like to run away from responsibility. And what I mean by responsibility, I mean, in this our context of our change process, our responsibility was to examine how we were to acquire power. We have to know that we have been recolonized. It is not Cameroon who's going to tell us. It is not the United Kingdom. We have the same faculties of humanity as they to recognize that what we negotiated in 1961 hasn't turned out. So why are we waiting for somebody to come and call a conference for a solution that is designed to be pro-Cameroon, ultimately? Why are we waiting for dialogues to be called, negotiations to be called? Antonio Guterres, United Nations President, Secretary General, has been making pronouncements, but here is as a diplomat, he has stayed clear of identifying the root cause of our problem. He dances around the world and is sure that he doesn't interfere in the internal affairs of Cameroon because United Nations is a state preservation entity. So the state they recognize the Republic of Cameroon. Our job is to make sure they know that the Republic of Cameroon has recolonized Republic of Ambazonia. That is not a political exercise. That is a legal exercise, which the Republic of Ambazonia has so meticulously done. Unfortunately, it is the same Ambazonian politicians who have refused to use that message. So with 30% of the power, we are conducting a revolution without accessing the 30% of the power. So where are we? That is the reason why countries are just looking at us. I mean, they're looking at us because we are unable to give them that handle which they can use to now demand from Cameroon, please, why are you interfering in the internal affairs of a sovereign state, Republic of Ambazonia? It is for them to now say, no, it is Republic of Cameroon. Then they'll say, prove it. And they can't because they didn't prove it in 1986 at the military tribunal. Where Fongo was being accused for treason, and he invoked the restoration law and the argument that Cameroon has reneged from the Confederation, and he was vindicated. They didn't prove it in 1992 in ACB 28 in the Bamenda High Court case, and they didn't prove it. Actually, they validated it in the ICJ Bakassi case. That is when they said the Western Cameroon, by virtue of the plebiscite, joined Cameroon. So they basically they tendered a document which is validated under international law that the plebiscite was the reason why these English-speaking people are with you. Okay, now let's examine the context of the plebiscite. It came in very clear, the terms were there, you were to engage into a confederation, the constitution was to have been drawn on those 8 matters, which never took effect. So, Ambazonians, if you were to argue your case and you stay away from the politicking, which is killing us today, you will have countries, starting with Nigeria, recognizing you. You will have other countries like South Africa, who has required that Nigeria first be on our side because of what they call the principle of proximity effect. And the United Kingdom, okay, Brexit happened on the virtue of a law that was inserted in the Maastricht Treaty, where every country, sovereign state has their right, judging on circumstances that may happen in the exercise of the union, decide that they don't want to. And the United Kingdom invoked it, and they are out of the United European Union. The law has worked. Small countries exist. Liechtenstein, Monaco, Luxembourg. All those small countries exist in European Union. Nobody is there trying to say they must join Germany or they must join France. Why on earth do we think it is these English-speaking people in this part of the world who must exist as a country with French-speaking people? This is unheard of, and it is intolerable. And the only time the message can be known to the world is if we state this truth, but we are not the one. Let's accept full responsibility for our demise. Oh, we went ahead and provoked a conflict, and I will put it there. They may be now calling you and I said, no, it wasn't provoked. I know it because I was with the Skakuf Enterprise and I knew how those guys were saber rattling and with the jingoistic fever. People who have no knowledge of the boundaries of their sovereignty, who could not articulate the case, were so eager to begin a conflict situation, whereas the recommendation given to us by federal government of Nigeria was to go get united. And the Skakuf Enterprise was just performing right when they sabotaged it at the third conclave. Had it been that that had not happened, we would be in the position where the Ambazonia that has risen to fall no more that happened in September would have now merged with the United Front of the Skakuf Enterprise to generate the electricity of the Ambazonian nationalism all across the world. People will now be able to see now that truly these people deserve their sovereign state. That is lacking. That is still lacking. We haven't generated that electricity. The world is still dark. They don't know who we are because of what we are telling them. We are telling them that we are Cameroonians. We call ourselves Southern Cameroonians. And Southern Cameroonians does not conduct the electricity of Ambazonian rising to fall no more. Not at all. These politicians who keep calling ourselves Southern Cameroonians are doing a disservice to the Ambazonian rising to fall no more movement. They should stop it. That is, okay. Oh, well, they'll claim it is history.
All right.
But let me tell you something about history is there for you to use to exercise justice for your current, present, and for the future. It's not for you to be imposed upon.
Well, that is a very good note to end on. Thank you for that passionate closing. Thank you to all of our viewers. This has been a very, very packed 2 hours with a lot of information. And we will continue to do this because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we who have the opportunity to use platforms as this to promote change, that is the most we can do. Aside from other contributions that we can make. Those who are on the ground, you have a role to play. Every one of us has a role. And as long as each and everyone plays that role to the full impact, I think we can for sure drive the kinds of change that we want to see. It is only when we refuse to play our role or when we try to play another role that we cause confusion, and we leave an opening for those who want to use divide and rule to come in and divide us. But as long as we recognize that we may not all speak with the same voice, but we are all playing a role that is unique to our strength and capacities and driving towards a common purpose, then we are more powerful and we can achieve that. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this show. Please follow us on Facebook so that you can get alerted when we have our shows come on. Follow us and subscribe to our YouTube page. And also you can subscribe to our website, which is unfilteredwithcheps.com. And we will see you next week for another impactful conversation. And we will continue on this trend talking about Africa and the change that we can all bring. Thank you so much. Have a good night and a good evening to those of you who it's evening.
Thank you, Chaps. Have a good night, everyone. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. I'm your host here, Chef McFarlane. Welcome to Unfiltered. I'm your host here, Chef McFarlane. Welcome to Unfiltered. I'm your host here, Chef McFarlane. Welcome to Unfiltered.